at the end. However, I'd still give you all the benefit of, if at all there is something that is, wrangling in your mind, which you thought that before you listen to me, you need to ask. If anyone has something like that, please go ahead, raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask the question. Anyone? Anyone had any specific doubt before I jump into the topic itself? Yes, Saurav Singh. Somebody has raised the hand. Yeah, I had seen someone.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Please go ahead. Ask your question.
So I'm Dr. Snehasis Bhakta. So one of the challenges, I'm from chemistry department. So one of the challenges in NEP we are facing is that infrastructure in terms of instrumentation, lack of instrumentation, and we are not getting from state government or from UGC. So that is one of the concern we are facing every day. I mean,
but that I don't think Dr. Bhakta comes from NEP. It is that there is a lack of infrastructure in the institution. NEP has only said that you should have high quality education. So I think it's a question of really trying to take it up with the state government. Though without infrastructure, it is very, very difficult to implement any subjects which has a practical component. I fully share your concern. But at the same time, if we are collaborating with other institutions, then it is possible that you can take advantage of that collaboration to address any infrastructure deficits. But the problem is, I don't think institutions are collaborating also. Sharing of resources is something that we are sort of, I would say, very, very selfish. We don't want to share our resources. Even if we don't have it, we don't want to borrow it from others. Lots of, I would say, biases that we have come in the way of a very open-minded way in which higher education or any education should be implemented, particularly, yes, higher education, because in school we don't expect much of sharing of resources. But that, Dr. Bhakta, is not really an NEP challenge. It has been a systemic challenge that India has faced, because some higher education institutions are abundant with resources and infrastructure, but some other higher education institutions are completely deprived of it. So I think it's not really, but I wouldn't say we can remain silent. We need to work, take it up. The way in which you make your appeal to the state government that these are the actual lacunae which is coming in the way of providing quality education in chemistry discipline and in other disciplines which require laboratory facilities, can be put up as a more focused kind of a thing. What happens is, if you simply write an application that these instruments are not there, we can't do it, it might take a very limited attention. So the way we make out our case also becomes very important. A number of institutions come together, write out specifically what are the missing things in chemistry, in physics, and so on, then indicate that these are the institutions which are lacking it. So make it like a very comprehensive kind of an appeal, which will reach out to the concerned officials in the state government, and address your letters always to the Principal Secretary Education, so that then it trickles down and comes down to the lower level. But if you write to a lower level, it may never go up to the higher level. So always address it to the top person in the bureaucracy, and that is the Principal Secretary Higher Education. Address it to them. In case West Bengal has got a separate one for, let us say, technical education, then write it to the Principal Secretary Technical Education.
Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of other hands we can take up till 9:45 max. Yes, the next person, please, Chatterjee.
Ma'am, I teach English literature in Gujarat College, Ahmedabad. My question is regarding the dwindling of the workload. Ma'am, because I teach English, we were allowed to teach English compulsory across multiple programs. Now with the appearance of NEP, this English compulsory is now Hindi compulsory, Urdu compulsory, Persian compulsory, Gujarati Hindi, and so on. There are many others, which means the amount of workload that we had has gone down significantly. And which also means that we are now subjected to untimely transfers, number one, and even losing of jobs, because now my HOD shows my workload as his own. Where do I go then? I mean, it is a threat to our jobs. We may never get to do an RC with AMU again. So can you please help us with this?
Actually, it is really sorry to know that Gujarat government is implementing the NEP in a very wrong way. There is no compulsory component in the national education policy. The guidelines for the 4-year undergraduate program explicitly talk about common courses. The core disciplinary courses and English literature comes as a core disciplinary course. It also comes in as a multidisciplinary course. And we have ability enhancement courses, which are communicative in languages. And in that also, all the languages come in. So I don't know from where this whole
And
thing is coming about
this is
compulsory
because, yeah, sorry.
Gujarati and compulsory English and compulsory Persian and so on. There is no language we have made compulsory.
So, ma'am, it is not compulsory, but under AEC, there are
Mhm.
these communicative languages, AEC and
Right.
SEC, there are these
Yes.
communicative languages. Earlier,
Yes.
the option was limited only to English.
So
Now,
that is
the
not
option has
desirable. That
opened
is
up.
not desirable. That is not desirable, Dr. Chatterjee,
Yeah,
for the
but
simple
now it has
reason that
opened up. Yeah.
yes, we should open
So,
it up and we desire that we promote multilingualism. I stand by that. But the fact is that English language is a language which comes under core disciplinary as well as multidisciplinary. So please take it up in understanding that English literature and language is a separate subject in its own right. And it is not there restricted to only communicative English. That is only one offshoot, because somebody who is studying, let us say, because we made higher education to be opened up in regional languages, we have therefore said that since students will be learning it in regional languages, they should still have good communication skills in English. And therefore, we have put that as a part of the ability enhancement courses. Someone who's learning it in English wants to learn Gujarati communicative English or any other language should be given the opportunity for that. But if your HOD is playing up with you, it has nothing to do with the national education policy. It is more in terms of internal politics. And I think you should be able to sort of understand the 4-year guidelines. You understand it, make out a case in front of your principal or in front of your director, whoever is heading your institute, that this is the 4-year undergraduate program. You don't have language subjects in English literature under your core disciplinary.
we do, ma'am, but the people who opt for it are very limited in number. So that brings down our workload. So,
And
and
what
we,
about multidisciplinary? Under the multidisciplinary,
the same thing, ma'am, we have less than 30 students. So it becomes
we have
difficult
not
for
put a
us.
seat limit also. The NEP has
No.
clearly said that even if there are 2 students, you will allow that student to take that and that subject should be offered. And very clearly, the UGC guidelines also indicate that under this banner of having flexible options, no existing positions would be removed. What more do they want? It is very, very explicit. Then how is it that state governments are completely violating what the UGC guidelines are saying? It's nothing to do with the national education policy, Dr. Chatterjee. I'm sorry to say that. It is a question of how internal governance in your institution is sadly being mismanaged for the maybe saving of revenue. Maybe you all are not teaching positions which are sanctioned and they want to take that care of under the NEP to say कि नहीं हम staff को निकाल देंगे. Nowhere we have said that staff will be retrenched under the care of trying to implement the 4-year undergraduate multidisciplinary program. So you'll have to really fight out a battle over there. I'm sorry, from our end, the guidelines are very explicit and clear, and English language and literature or any subject is not undermined, even if there are only 2 students taking it, and it is across institutions also, because there will be students from other institutions who want to do it with your institution. If there is a, let us say, a commerce college and they don't have English language and literature, there should be students from that college who should be taking it up. So there are n number of opportunities. Unfortunately, HEIs in our country have all the time been responsible for hitting its own death knell by trying to interpret things for suiting maybe some vested interests. And it is really a sorry state, Dr. Chatterjee, but NEP does not say any of these things. It is a question of how the state government has wrongly interpreted it for their own vested interest and for maybe their own reasons of trying to save on revenue, particularly when it comes to axing teaching faculty. So you please make out a good fight and take it up with them, that it is very clear. Go through the guidelines, highlight all the relevant points and take it up with them कि यहाँ कहीं भी लिखा नहीं है कि ये कंपलसरी बनाओ. अदर एबिलिटी एनहांसमेंट कोर्स के साथ में you are supposed to have core disciplinary, multidisciplinary, other colleges who are having commerce and let us say any other discipline where English is not being taught, those students have also to be accommodated in our college. So you take up all these things, and also explicitly that no teaching positions would be sort of struck down, and you can, if that is not yielding results, then I would say you can appeal to the state government and further on to the UGC. But at this stage, first take it up with your institution.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, please. The next person, I think I had seen two more hands. We'll take that up. Yeah, Dr. Ravish Singh, please go ahead.
नमस्ते मैम। स्नेहाशीष जी के सवाल को मैं भी करना चाह रहा था और जवाब तो हम लोगों को मिल ही गया है। एनईपी से आप जुड़ी हुई हैं मैम, तो थोड़ा सा एनईपी के विषय में हम लोगों को विस्तार से बता दिया जाए, यही मैं चाहता हूँ।
वही तो सेशन तो उसी के लिए हो रहा है
जी मैम,
वो तो विस्तार से हम करेंगे ही। वो
जी।
आपका प्रश्न उसी से है जो बक्ता जी पूछ रहे थे, वही बात कर रहे थे आप।
स्नेहाशीष जो पूछ रहे थे वही था। धन्यवाद।
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? Otherwise, we can jump into the talk. Was there anyone else? Okay.
Ma'am, can
Yeah,
I?
yeah. Akshay Kumar, we'll take that as your last question, and then I'll jump into the talk because it'll be 9:45 then. Yes, Akshay, please go ahead.
अभिनंदन मैम, प्रणाम। मैम यानी P20 तो ठीक है अपनी जगह, लेकिन ये है कि जो ये पूरे साल भर जो है 5-6 महीने एग्जाम हो रहे हैं, इससे शिक्षा का जो प्रोसेस है, क्रियान्वयन है, वो बहुत बाधित हो चुका है और हम मात्र 3-4 महीने बच्चों को पढ़ा पा रहे हैं, बाकी सब एग्जाम, छुट्टियां, ये वो यही सब चल रहा है। तो इसके लिए क्या है, थोड़ा मार्गदर्शन कीजिए।
नहीं, ये प्रश्न बाकी भी प्रोग्राम्स में काफी सारे फैकल्टी ने उठाए हैं, लेकिन 6 महीने की बात तो नहीं की थी उन्होंने बताया था कि 3 महीने या 4 महीने के आसपास तो हमारे परीक्षाओं में लग जाती है और पढ़ाने की टाइम हमें बहुत कम मिलती है। इसमें दो ही चीज होना है, क्योंकि हमने सेमेस्टर सिस्टम जो लेके आया है, हमने ये नहीं कहा है कि उसमें परीक्षाएं 2-2 महीने चलते रहे। हमने ये कहा है कि ये आप सीमित टाइम में आप इसको कंप्लीट किया जाए। अब जो वर्कलोड की बात आ जाती है, उसमें बहुत सारे चीज में हमें फैकल्टी को बदलाव लेके आना है। हमारी मानसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग ये था कि हर विषय को हम क्लास में लेक्चर लेते हुए खत्म करेंगे। हम ये कहना चाहते हैं कि आज के दिन में लेक्चर जो हम बताते हैं, ये एक आउटडेटेड कंसेप्ट ऑफ टीचिंग है। लेक्चर देना एक आउटडेटेड कंसेप्ट है, क्योंकि आज के बच्चों का जो अटेंशन स्पैन है, और क्योंकि उनको ये इंफॉर्मेशन ऑलरेडी इंटरनेट में अवेलेबल है, वो हमारे क्लास में इसलिए आते हैं कि उसका जो नॉलेज लेवल है, जिसके उसके पास अवेयरनेस है, इसको हम बढ़ावा देते हुए आउटकम बेस्ड एजुकेशन में लेने के लिए हम काफी सारे एक्टिविटीज में उन्हें इन्वॉल्व करें। तो जो आपका जो अंडरस्टैंडिंग है कि पूरा सिलेबस मुझे इतने दिनों में कंप्लीट करना है, उसको कंप्लीटली चेंज कर दीजिए, इन द सेंस कि सिलेबस को जो कंप्लीट करना है, कुछ चीजों में लेक्चर होना, कुछ चीजों में ग्रुप डिस्कशन होना, कुछ चीजों में प्रेजेंटेशन करवाना, कुछ चीजों में फील्ड स्टडी करवाना। इस तरह से आप एक्टिविटीज को लिंक करते जाओगे तो आपका जो लिमिटेड टीचिंग आवर्स जो आपके पास है एग्जाम के टाइम छोड़ते हुए, आपको बहुत सारे वेज ऑफ टीचिंग लेके आ सकते हैं, जिसमें आपका वो जो वर्कलोड प्रेशर आपके माइंड में है, ये आप निकाल सकते हैं। So let me try in my talk to give you more explanation on this. But it is a fact that universities are completely disorganized in the way they schedule their examinations. What can be completed in 45 days for a given semester, they are extending it unwantedly to even 90 and sometimes even 120 days, which is quite uncalled for. You cannot have that. It is because you do not actually understand the way in which examination timetables have to be organized. But that cannot be a reason why we should not have semester system, because semester system must be encouraged, as it is shown to yield internationally and globally a lot of qualitative benefits. आज के दिन में हमारे जो डिग्री होल्डर बाहर निकल रहे हैं, वो डिग्री का कुछ भी वैल्यू नहीं है, क्योंकि सिर्फ एक कागज का टुकड़ा है उनके हाथ में, क्योंकि उसने पढ़ाई नहीं की है और कुछ शिक्षा ही नहीं हासिल की है। इस तरह से अगर हम चलते ही जाएंगे तो उनका ना नौकरी मिलेगी, न खुद अपने आप को एक सेल्फ प्रोडक्टिव इंडिविजुअल बनाने में हमारी शिक्षा से कोई भी हेल्प नहीं मिल रहा है। ये सारी चीजों को सिस्टमिकली अगर हमें चेंज करना है So we need to completely change the way we are conducting our education system. And that is why the national education is talking about changes. So we'll take that as the last question. It is already 9:48 and we have to stop by 11 o'clock because I have another session with batch 2 at 11:15. So let me get into the talk and I'll keep the remaining 15 minutes if I can by 9:45, taking about an hour for the session for again any other questions that remain outstanding. So thank you all for your initial interaction. Let me get into the topic of the transformational reforms that the national education policy. Yes, Sachin, you can hold on to your question till the end of the program.
Yes, मैम मैम चूंकि आप एनईपी से जुड़ी हुई हैं तो बस एक सहज सा प्रश्न था कि क्या जब एनईपी बनाई जा रही थी तो देश में जो संस्थाएं हैं उनके संसाधन कितने हैं इसका ध्यान दिया गया? जैसे मैं बुंदेलखंड में हूँ मैम.
I'll take up your question later, Sachin. As I said, I will talk about the policy and then we'll take it up. Yeah. So good morning once again to all of you. I go by the fact that you all are already facing a lot of NEP implementation challenges, but I want you all to understand the policy in a much larger perspective. As far as the NEP is concerned, the most important recommendations that you all are concerned with are largely about implementing the 4-year undergraduate program, which we say is supposed to be holistic, multidisciplinary, flexible, with multiple entry and exit. But I don't want to confine myself to merely talking about one part of that recommendation. I want you to understand as educators the larger rationale why the policy is making such kind of a recommendation. For that, let me take you a little bit into the background of the formation and the formulation of this national education policy, which in a certain sense will also address what Sachin was trying to raise at the end as to whether the committees and whether the policy exercise took into consideration the huge infrastructural deficits in our educational institutions. Now, let us understand what policies are, why do policies keep coming out at intervals, and why it is very, very critical that this particular policy has recommended a lot of flexibility. So in the education policy making in independent India, as subject teachers of various disciplines, and maybe some of you being education, you know that there have been 3 major education policies in this independent India. One in 68, which is the outcome of the Kothari Commission report. One in 86, which is a Cape Committee exercise, which was partially modified in 1992. Both these having come out in the previous century, and the one in 2020 having come out in this century, and therefore the first in the 21st century. Even if we say it is the first, it has come out almost 2 decades after the century has gone by. Now, why do policies have to come out at regular intervals? You must also understand that policies come out in all sectors that the government deals with, whether it is trade, whether it is the economic policies, industrial policies, defense policies, foreign policies, youth policies, health policies. All these policies that come out at regular intervals. Why? Because policies are always responding to certain changes that happen within the society, within the economy, and within the globe. Also, policies must be viewed independent of each other. That is to say that, suppose you had the 1968 policy. At that time, I was in the schooling system. Some of you may not have been born at that time. But the 68 policy was then overridden by the 86 policy, with which many of you are beneficiaries. Now, the 86 policy is not to be compared to the 68 policy. You can do it for academic interest, but 86 policy is not remedying or correcting anything in the 68 policy. Why I say that is because policies exist independent of each other in response to certain changes that happen within the society and the economy. So what is important for us to understand is that what are those changes that have happened within the society and the economy to which a policy is responding. Therefore, it becomes important for us to understand what is it that the 2020 policy of education was responding to. What are those changes? What are those drivers of change? For which we need to understand 2 or 3 things. One is that any education system, when we talk about, it deals with 2 critical components of knowledge and learning. I don't think any one of us sitting here have any doubt that when we talk about education, we are dealing with knowledge, dissemination, transmission, production, generation, and so on. And we are also talking about a learning system within which many activities take place. Now, both these constructs or components of knowledge and learning has completely changed from what it was in the previous century. That is, when we look at knowledge in the 21st century and we look at learning in the 21st century, both these have changed. And what do I mean by that change? Most of us, and all of you all sitting here also, are ones in which we thought that knowledge exists in a compartmentalized manner, that they exist in hard, differentiated buckets. They are existing in silos. So, like we said, chemistry. Bhakta says, I am a professor in teaching chemistry. Or Chatterjee saying, I teach English literature. Or I am saying that I did my master's in political science. Each one of us are talking about one single discipline that still exists. The only difference being that that knowledge is compartmentalized, has completely changed in the 21st century, because we realize that knowledge is something that is porous, which is having interconnections among disciplines. And therefore, the integration of knowledge disciplines with disciplinary boundaries getting blurred is the reality of knowledge in the 21st century. So the porosity of knowledge and the osmosis effect resulting in knowledge disciplines getting interconnected resulted in the new notions of interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, cross-disciplinarity, transdisciplinarity. So when knowledge has got transformed and knowledge itself is multidisciplinary, and that there are implications of language with engineering, that there is implications of sociology with mathematics, the whole concept of hard separations by disciplines and compartmentalizing it by silos has completely got to go. And that is the reason why this aspect of change in knowledge is one of the founding reasons why the NEP 2020 recommends the idea of multidisciplinary education. Along with knowledge, learning has also completely got multidimensional. Just as knowledge is not unidimensional, learning is also not unidimensional, and learning in the 21st century is defined by 4 pillars. Learning to know, which is what a bulk of us do as teachers in classroom situations, where we are transmitting knowledge that resides in us. That is the theoretical knowledge, the conceptual knowledge, the basic concepts and so on, which we transmit to our receivers who are the learners, the cognitive part of the learning. So the cognitive learning is what we understand as learning to know, and which is what most of us are involved in. When Akshay is saying that we have to cover a lot of content that is mostly cognitive by nature. The second pillar of learning, which has come about in the 21st century, is learning to do. Learning to do is the understanding that there are practicals, there are experiential part of it, there is skills part of it, there is on the job part of it that is coming into existence. So skilling, experiential learning, and what we used to understand learning with the hands, the psychomotor domain of learning, is the second pillar of learning. The third pillar of learning comes in the context of sustainable development. That is learning to live together and to live with others. The idea of peace education, that we are all different, but we cannot promote discord, but we must have harmony. Global citizenship education, education for sustainable development, the ideas of compassion, peace, tolerance. These are acceptance of plurality, and yet the idea that we can remain in a harmonious manner, humanism, all these, because you cannot have learning in war-torn societies, in strife-driven societies. So the idea that we need to move towards peace education is the idea of learning to live together and to live with others. And just as human beings need to coexist, People have to coexist with other forms of nature that are there on planet Earth, whether it is water, whether it is energy, whether it is the flora and the fauna, the forest, the environment. So the whole idea of sustainable societies, and that all forms of nature, including human beings, have to coexist in a manner that we generate the resources that we have got inherited on planet Earth. And therefore, the third pillar is learning to live together and live with others. And that is where you have topics like peace education, universal human values, global citizenship education, education for sustainable development. These themes have come about because of this third pillar of learning. And the fourth pillar of learning is learning to be. Learning to be, alphabet BE, is merely to say that we are about 100 odd people who are gathered over here, and that each one of us is quite unique in terms of our identity, in terms of our talent, in terms of our aspirations, in terms of our capabilities and potentials. And therefore, there is a very strong need to recognize the uniqueness of each one of us, and therefore the need for individualization and customization of learning experiences. Therefore, the learning to be is the basis on which the NEP is founded. It is based on the idea that 100 students sitting in my class cannot be treated as one block, and that we need to individualize and customize to individual learning needs, and therefore a strong case for flexible pathways and multiple trajectories. So the multidimensionality of learning with the four pillars, which are also not mutually excluding one another, they are not mutually exclusive, and the multidimensionality of knowledge. In these two contexts, our education system cannot remain blind to these two factors. So the times that we learned, where knowledge was seen as singular in its disciplinary depth, where learning was seen as only cognitive learning and not any other form of learning, has got to completely change, because in the 21st century, both knowledge and learning are multidimensional. Brings in the third driver of change. In the 21st century, unlike in the 20th century, where you saw the rise of the computers and the internet, and already we are there on an information superhighway with a lot of data and facts being transmitted at enormous speed, synchronously across spaces and distances and geographies. Today, you have the rise of disruptive technologies. The word itself contains what it does. It disrupts the way we work, we communicate, we live, we travel, we bank, so many things. They are artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, data science, augmented reality, virtual reality. These are completely changing the way we continue to do things in a normal way. It has disrupted that. So these three drivers of change is very critical to be taken into account, because in education, who are the stakeholders? The students, the teachers, and the educational institutions, whether it is schools or colleges or universities. These three are the major stakeholders. And the primary stakeholder is the student. And what are we trying to educate the student for? We are trying to empower that student by instilling in him or her the right kind of knowledge, skills, competencies, and capabilities to make them productive individuals, contributing to their own individual growth, societal growth, nation's growth, economic development, and to become what we call 21st century global citizens. The key word is that they should become productive individuals. And they can become productive only if they have the right kind of knowledge, skills, and capabilities. And the right kind of knowledge and skills and capabilities in the context of the changes in knowledge and learning and disruptive technologies call for graduates. You and me are I-shaped graduates. But today in the 21st century, graduates have got to become T-shaped. Not only have disciplinary depth, but breadth of knowledge across various disciplines, across multiple skill sets, because they are living in a time when knowledge is multidisciplinary and learning is multidimensional, and disruptive technologies are threatening the kind of jobs that human beings will have. If you hear people talking about the kind of changes that artificial intelligence will do, it is very, very scary. You hear that there will be no jobs left for human beings in the coming 7 years if AI goes the way it is. Machine intelligence challenging human intelligence. And the priority should be that human intelligence remain uppermost. And that is the reason why we cannot continue to teach our students the way our teachers taught us. We can respect our teachers, we can value them, we can cherish all their qualities of determination and dedication and integrity and morality and so on. But the teachers who taught us did not teach us for a time when knowledge was multidisciplinary, did not teach us for a time when learning was multidimensional, and were never seeing the threat of disruptive technologies. So when we teach our students today, we are preparing them to be future ready at a time when they are expected to become T-shaped graduates. Therefore, the notions of holistic, integrated, multidisciplinary undergraduate program emanates from these notions. And that is equally more important, because I'm sure all of us sitting over here know that today India is the nation which has the largest youth population in the world. And therefore, India is the one which is going to provide the human capital, the knowledge power, the soft power to all the nations across where you are seeing an aging population, be it Japan or Korea or Germany or the vast number of European countries, UK, US, all of them are having an aging population. As opposed to that, India is sitting with a huge demographic dividend. But that demographic dividend will be a dividend only if that youth is gainfully employed, if they are productive individuals. So the kind of learning that we did with BSc chemistry, BA political science, MA education, these kind of degrees have no value because they are required to have multidisciplinary degrees. And therefore, it is in this context that the policy is talking about the need for that 4-year integrated program. So you all know what that combination is. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but just to give that context as a transformation, we are giving students at undergraduate level a lot of flexibilities. And mind you, though you may have read the policy only from the higher education part, it is only a 66-page document. Please read the school education also and the entire policy in its entirety. The reason why I say that is the policy recognizes that education happens in an organic continuum, and that learning that happens at higher levels are impacted by learnings that happen at the school level. And that is why we are talking in school education of a new paradigm, which is the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, as opposed to what we are conventionally understanding as the 10 plus 2. Now, during the 10 plus 2 as a part of the 86 policy, the idea was of physically restructuring the schools. Whereas under the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, we are not talking about physical restructuring. Then the restructuring is coming in the approaches to pedagogy, the approaches to curriculum, and the approaches to the examination systems. So the approaches talk in terms of the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 is recognizing that learning happens in a very developmentally appropriate manner, and that the first 5 years between ages 3 to 8 is the foundational stage, where the learner is learning through a robust ECCE program, through a playway-based method, through joyful activities. The preparedness to learn is being done among the learners, and it is not the formal learning. And that is the foundational stage where we are also learning what you and I used to say, the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is only the literacy and numeracy skills. So the first 5 years is the foundational stage. 8 to 11 is the preparatory stage, the initiation into formal learning. 11 to 14 is the middle stage, and that is where the bulk of these changes are taking place, where we are doing away with this hard separations between what is curricular subjects, co-curricular subjects, extracurricular subjects. We used to say that understanding only certain subjects are treated as curricular, because we are saying that learning maths or science or social sciences or languages, this is curricular, that is relating to the cognitive part of it. We are not understanding that someone who is good at dramatics, someone who is good at playing a sport, someone who can sing well, someone who can paint well is also a talent. The creative and the cognitive coexist. The two hemispheres in our brain is not growing at different levels. They grow together. The creative and the cognitive supplement and complement one another. And therefore, the understanding that the creative helps the cognitive is the realization that all talents that reside in children must be optimized. And that is why music will also have marks, sports will also have marks, painting will also have marks, every talent that a child has. And therefore, this so-called hierarchy we created, that someone who is good at maths is more intelligent than someone who can sing well, is completely misplaced. And this is a realization that music and math sometimes coexist in a certain manner. Therefore, this hard differentiation, and all subjects will carry weightage. And all subjects which carry weightage will also accommodate for entrance examinations into higher education. So that changes. And also the idea that we should not be testing memory of the children, rote learning. So children memorize things without understanding it, without actually assimilating it. And that is why I said that piece of paper in that hand is a worthless piece of paper that they call a degree. Because if there is no real learning and no real assimilation, they can fail to perform in the world of work, and which is what we are seeing. If you are having unemployed postgraduates and doctoral degree people, it is because that piece of paper has no value in the job market. So we have to understand the hard reality. It is not very comforting to hear it, but we must understand that this is the systemic problems that we are trying to address. Therefore, what are we going to test? Their analytical capabilities, problem-solving abilities, their abilities to have scientific temper, rational thought, communicative abilities. These are the competencies, and moving towards competency-based education. Therefore, the kind of assessments we do, and if you have read the newspapers, we say we are going for open book as what we recommended in NEP. We can recommend open book because that is not directly testing or asking a question that can be lifted from the textbook. The student has to analyze it. The student has to make sort of problem solving for that. And therefore, the idea of how we choose the curricula, how we teach the subject, how we assess the student, all undergoes the changes in the middle school stage, which is happening between the ages of 11 to 14. And the 14 to 18 is the secondary stage. And in the secondary stage, which is covering your 9 and 10 and the 11 and 12, which is seen as one single continuum of the 4 years, we are talking under the national curriculum framework of 10 areas where students will choose their subjects. Those are subjects which cover the foundational stage and those which cover the secondary stage. The 8 core areas are your maths education, science education, social science education, language education, physical education, arts education, vocational education, and also I would say interdisciplinary areas. 8 areas in which all students of class 10 and class 12 will choose their subjects. By doing that, you will actually encourage what we call as holistic development, where it is not just the cognitive development and the intellectual development, but the aesthetic development, the moral development, the spiritual development, the values that are developed in the socio-emotional development, the psychological development, all which is necessary, that is there for what we call the holistic development of an individual, and many other reforms that happen in school education, which I don't have the time to delve into. But this is what translates into the idea of your flexible 3-year, 4-year undergraduate program. But since we cannot wait for reforms of NEP to start with complete the school education and then start in higher education, both are going parallelly. So you are actually having a challenge because you're dealing with students who came from a very rigid school system and which is very structured. And here we are coming to one, we are moving from the structured to the flexible. So, and also the other challenge is that you and I have a mindset which is highly structured. We have come out from structured systems and we cannot open ourselves to systems which are flexible. That is precisely the reason why many of these things seem more challenging for us. But let me give you just an anecdotal, or rather an analogy which you may relate to very well. That analogy is nothing but the theory of evolution, which all of us are aware, the Darwinian theory, which talks about the survival of the fittest. It merely tries to tell us that an animal as strong and as large as the dinosaur could become extinct because of the inability to adapt to the changing circumstances. So the ability to adapt is the key driver for survival. And if we do not want to be the dinosaur as a teacher, or we don't want our student to be the dinosaur to become extinct, then we must recognize the three drivers of knowledge, learning, and disruptive technologies, which call for changes from the way you and I were teaching to go to new ways in which we are teaching. So this is the reason why we need to understand that the 4-year undergraduate program, which talks about common courses, problem solving skills, communication skills, constitution, digital skills, research skills, Indian knowledge systems, universal human values, peace education, these are all common courses. Please understand, for common courses, except for courses which have credits, you don't earmark periods or classes. These are to be weaved in. Whether I teach mechanical engineering, or whether I teach physics, or whether I teach sociology, communication skills are to be woven into the topic that I teach. Digital skills, problem solving skills, research skills. You don't have to have earmarked periods for that. These are inbuilt and they are all your so-called 21st century skills. These are not skills that we have invented out of nowhere. These are skills that our students must have so that they can become productive individuals. Now, these common courses, as I repeat, only those with credits, such as universal human values or Indian knowledge system, where there are earmarked credits, can have earmarked periods. The rest of it is to be taught as part of your regular subjects that you teach. Then comes your core disciplinary subjects and your interdisciplinary subjects. And because students are allowed to have flexibility in choosing courses across a range of subjects, and your college may only be an arts college or a science college or a commerce college, then it is possible that you may have to collaborate with other institutions. And UGC guidelines tell you these very norms, how to transform institutions into multidisciplinary institutions. So the core subjects, then your interdisciplinary subjects, other than the core area, subjects that you allow students to take in keeping with that notion that knowledge is multidimensional, that they should have exposure not just to chemistry or not just to political science, but to many other subjects completely different from their own area. Then the ability enhancement, of which Dr. Chatterjee made a reference to, which are communicative skills across languages, and where in a nation like India, we promote the idea of multilingualism. It is very, very important that we offer this kind of options to the students, because there is direct evidence to tell us that the more languages you learn, it promotes cognitive thinking. So language learning and cognitive thinking are closely interrelated. Empirical evidence tells us that. It is not a romantic notion that we in the committee thought about. It is the idea that India, which is home to 1,650 languages, which includes the dialects and not just your 22 languages in the Indian Constitution, must be able to encourage the communicative abilities across a range of languages. Therefore, the ability enhancement courses. Then comes your skill enhancement courses and the need to do the learning to do, which is the skills, the experiential. And when you talk about skills, don't sit with these very outdated ideas that it is only learning plumbing or electrical work and so on. The skill education today, when we look at very high-end areas that come out into MSME sectors in terms of all the logistics and supply chain management, blockchain management, cold chain management, hospitality sector, hospital administration, all these sectors, and the fast-moving consumer goods, the IT sector, the services sector, retail management, agribusiness management. So a whole range in keeping with that idea that children should have multiple skill sets. So this whole notion of skill enhancement would require universities and colleges to think of how they can offer this, not just the cognitive knowledge, it is also the skills part of it that is going to help them as they go along into a very challenging job market. A job market in which job profiles will be changing so dynamically and where job profiles are completely unknown. So in that context, we are completely talking of doing away with only the theoretical understanding, but also taking into account a lot of vocational subjects. And the last is your value-added courses. Now, where many of the institutions are fudging between skill enhancement and value-added. Basically, the value-added should be offering things that don't really fit into that straight-jacketed definitions of skill enhancement. So it can be design thinking, it can be AI modeling, it can be 3D modeling, all these, or even in terms of journalism and media studies, these are value-added courses. So there is a bouquet of 6 categories of courses. And the flexibilities we give to the students are flexibilities that range from taking up courses across disciplines, taking up courses across multiple institutions, taking up courses if not offered through the face-to-face, through the open and distance education, and also then giving them the flexibility that they can exit at the end of the first year or the second year. So as per the UGC guidelines, you are having 40 credits accumulated every year. And at the end of every year, you are entitled to get a UG certificate or a UG diploma, or you get your bachelor's at the end of the third year. And you can completely exit from your undergraduate program without having to do the fourth year. Now, the only condition that we have made it mandatory is that anyone choosing to exit at the end of any year and wants a certificate must complete that mandatory internship. So major change in the undergraduate program is that all undergraduate students, whether you're arts, science, commerce, or any non-technical subject also, not just engineering and management, which was already having it, but all non-technical subjects also mandatory internship would be there. The reason why we did that is because there is a huge gap between students in the world of education and the world of work. And one conventionally sees that students, when they go out into the world of work, seem to be only theoretically knowing something, cannot face an interview board, cannot communicate their thoughts, cannot participate in a group discussion, and being thrown a problem, cannot even solve that problem. That is a huge gap which has resulted in a high number of unemployed graduates. And more than unemployed graduates, the criticism that our graduates are unemployable, a direct slap on our face. It is not somebody else's problem, it is our problem. We are the faculty that they're slapping. Then saying that the graduates are unemployable. Don't think it is somebody else's problem. It is you and me that they are actually slapping on our face. So please understand that when we say that our graduates have to become employable, they must have all that employability skills that is available and required in the world of work, and which is all the problem solving abilities, the independent thinking, the rational thought, the analytical capabilities, the collaborative skills, the communicative skills. These are all skills that can come in when they do internships, by doing a field work, identifying an area of study. How do you go about doing that study? Going and meeting people, conducting a survey, coming out with the findings. So this part of internships, should a student want to exit and insist on a certification, that student completes that internship in the year. And that is why in our induction meetings that you have, you must, as a person who is going to be the one giving this information, be well informed about it. And therefore, you cannot just read the policy and say that I know it all. You must read through all the guidelines so that you are informing your students about all these mandatory requirements. Now, when we say this flexibilities, they are saying that you exit. What is the time period? We are talking about a 7-year window. Now, all this is possible through 3 instrumentalities. The academic bank of credit, which is a digital storehouse of academic credits. Therefore, there are no ideas of physical grade cards, because students are doing courses not only from X institution, but from X, Y, A, B, C institutions. Therefore, these courses are spread across multiple institutions. The student is taking a break, coming back, and those grades have to be retained. So the ABC is a digital storehouse. A student comes in with a kind of an unique ID. And earlier we were thinking that Aadhaar would be enough, but now we are talking about APAR. We are talking about an automated personal academic account registration, and that number is the one which will facilitate the storage of the academic credits across institutions and across number of years, coming through the DigiLocker, and institutions onboard it on through the ABC portal. Now, when a student moves from one institution to another, the National Higher Education Qualifications Framework ensure a certain degree of equivalence. Therefore, they studied, let us say, in a university like my alma mater, Mumbai, and then went on to, let us say, JNU. Then you have that what I did from the University of Mumbai has certain credits, but let's forget JNU, which is largely PG education, Delhi University, let us say. The courses that I did, I don't have to repeat, because the NHEQF gives me the credit mobility and ensures a certain degree of equivalence, so that I have almost 80% of that syllabi covered. Mind you, NHEQF equivalence is only 80%, because when you say autonomous colleges are given freedom to frame their curricula to the extent of 80%, which is their freedom, and 20%, 80%, which is the mandatory part, and the 20% is the only part they can tweak with. So the 80% is a commonality, more or less. So the difference is only that 20% which we allow for the autonomous institution. That 20% we think is something that the student can actually seamlessly go through, or maybe with to some extent with some bridge courses that the student can cover. The third instrumentality is the National Credit Framework, which helps the mobility across open and distance learning, across skill education, ITI education, polytechnic education, and you have a credit weightage that is given and credit levels that are earmarked, which will indicate to what credit level you have covered and from which stream you have come in, facilitating the lateral entry and mobility. Now, this entire structure of a highly flexible 3-year, 4-year program gives students also the option to actually undergo the 4th year of their undergraduate program. So all non-technical disciplines like the arts, science, commerce, and business administration and so on are all non-4-year programs. Engineering, medicine, most of them are 4-year programs. But here we are saying in the non-technical areas, we are giving you an option of the 4 years. And we are giving it with 2 options. We are giving it with the option that you can do it with coursework in your 7th and 8th semester, and you get it with honors. And in your 3rd year, you get it with majoring. Out of the 120 credits, more than 50% of credits in one discipline entitles you to get a bachelor's with majoring. And in your 6th, 7th, and 8th semester, when you do it with more than 50% credits, you are able to get it with honors. But there is a 4th dimension to that, and that is with research. So there are 4th year bachelor student, if they have scored in their 3rd year a 7.5 CGPA and proven their merit, they can join bachelors with research, and they will be doing research work in their 7th and their 8th semester, somewhat equivalent to an MPhil dissertation, and they will be awarded bachelors of research. Now, these 3 combination, 3 years is also a degree, 4 years with coursework is a degree, 4 years with research, affects your master's level. The 3-year bachelors will do the revised PG program of 2 years, 4-year bachelor's will do the revised 1-year master's, and a 4-year bachelor's with research is exempted from master's to join the PhD program directly. So the PhD will have 3 categories of students: a 3-year bachelor's with 2 years master's, a 4-year bachelor's with 1-year master's, or a 4-year bachelor's with research coming in. Now, this is the complete change, which is giving you flexibility in duration across choices of subjects, across the way in which you take it across institutions, including the modes of learning. And the instrumentalities, as I said, are the ABC, the NHEQF, and the National Credit Framework. Now, the point is that we have abolished, or we have decided to stop MPhil altogether, a matter which came up for a lot of concern as to why we decided to do that. And I take this opportunity to enlighten you on why we did that. We are all MPhil holders, but that does not devalue our degree. But the reason why MPhil need not be continued as a program is that at one time, MPhil was a precondition to do your PhD, which is no longer necessary because all PhD comes with coursework. MPhil was also an eligibility to become a lecturer, as we were called at the time we were recruited. It is no longer a condition to become an assistant professor. When a qualification is not necessary for employment or for higher education, it becomes obsolete. And that is the reason why we decided that MPhil as a program must be discontinued. And I'm happy that UGC, though late, brought out that notification calling for the discontinuation of the MPhil program. Now, coming to the other aspect, in terms of what we said, that we must have multiple skill sets of students, we must provide students. It is not enough to say that we should recognize their talent in dramatics and singing and music and physical education and so on. You need to provide opportunities for that. Therefore, in the chapter that we wrote on optimal learning environments, we have said all higher education institutions must provide avenues for debating clubs, dramatic clubs, eco clubs, youth clubs, sports and wellness, and so on. And therefore, these activities will provide for that other notion of holistic. Holistic is not just cognitive and intellectual, but it is also the aesthetic, it is also the artistic, it is also the physical development, and coming to the socio-emotional development. Now, this is a major concern in terms of the mental health and well-being of the students. In fact, the entire world today is trying to research on this very critical gray area, which is affecting the youth today, and that is the mental health and well-being. A major concern that is arising is because of the circumstances in which youngsters live today. Unlike you and me, who came in from joint family systems and where technologies like the mobiles were not known, where we connected to other individuals, youngsters of today live in virtual worlds of the Facebook and the Instagram and the social media, have become completely isolated individuals and resulting in a lot of socio-emotional stress. And this is leading to depression, bipolar disorders, and many psychological problems, including moving towards taking of drugs and substance abuse, and in extreme cases, student suicide. So the rising trend of student suicide is a matter of grave concern, calling for higher education institutions to not just provide academic and career counseling, but also psychological counseling. And the need, therefore, to look at the socio-emotional well-being of students requires us as teachers also to become ones who will become capable of being sensitive and sort of empathize with students who are in that situation. Of course, we are not students, we are not faculty who are equipped with psychology as our main discipline, but the roles that we may have to double up becomes very important. Now, I'll come to the reason why mental health is becoming greater challenge, because these students are likely to have so many problems that will affect their academic career or their academic success. And that is the reason why we need to address it and not look at it as if it is somebody else's problem. It's not my child, it's not my neighbor's child, it's not my relative's child. It is something that we read in newspaper headlines and forget about it. No, we have to be, as faculty, very, very concerned about this rising trend and to be able to be sensitive in how we deal with our students. Which brings me to the fact that the role of a teacher in this whole scenario is completely changing. Please understand, a student of today does not go through hordes and hordes of library readings to get the information. It is available so easily at the click of a mouse at his fingertip. And therefore, the student must feel that there is a need to come into the classes. Many of the programs that I attended, I heard faculty telling that students do not come into classes. If they need to come into classes, they need to feel that we offer to them something different from what they are getting on the YouTube or in the internet. And that is the reason why, as faculty, we move away from our role as one of a knowledge dispenser to one of a facilitator, an enabler, a motivator, a mentor, and a co-learner. And in that sense, create not passive learning environments. What I was replying to Akshay, that do not use only the lecture method. Attention span of a youngster today, born in the 21st century after 2001, is just a 3-minute TikTok video. And the student cannot sit from 9 to 4 listening to 8 faculty coming one after the other, and they are supposed to sit with their lips sealed. It is impossible to visualize that. You and I may have done it because of the times that we lived in. But we have to create active learning environments in which the learner engages with the content, the learner engages with fellow learners, and the learner engages with the faculty. And how do you do that? You do that through a number of activities, group discussions, quizzes, gamification using technology. Use variety of ways in which also it becomes important, because those who are intelligent and those who are not so intelligent come together and both have a mutually enriching environment. But here we are so conventionally used that I will speak and no one else will talk. That approach has resulted in passive learning. And therefore, these students simply sit there if attendance is compulsory, with no learning happening and no assimilation. We need to completely change that and engage students in their classes. A question that is often asked to me is, how do we do that? Because they are not used to that and they remain silent. You need to actually do a number of things in which you say that, okay, let us do this kind of a game. Let us start asking ourselves questions across to one another, and we will come to the topic. So your 45 minutes or 1 hour, you prepare a lesson plan, which none of us do, because we think we are in higher education and therefore there is no need to do that, unlike in school education. Prepare lesson plans which are directly related to the learning outcomes. And when you say outcomes, unbundle the outcomes. What is the knowledge that the student needs to acquire? What is the understanding? What is the skill? What is the competencies? And in higher education, we have chosen to be very, very complacent, because our performance is not linked to the performance of the student. Unlike a school teacher who is directly held responsible for poor school results. We do not even know where our higher education students went. Are they employed? Are they just wandering around? We do not know that, because we think I went and took my class. I did it. My 200 hours I completed. I did my workload. What should I bother about the student? If we remain like that, then I think first we are not fit to be faculty, and this is not a 9-to-5 job, and you have taken on a responsibility where you have thought that you are actually shaping the future of the youngster. And if you have to do that, you must move towards outcome-based education. So you have to do a lot of preparatory work. Throw away all your brown colored notes and your yellow colored notes, which you may have made at years back, and start thinking afresh into this new environment where you disaggregate your content that you need to teach through a variety of activities and use for your internal assessment many other ways other than merely giving assignments. Ways in which you use problem-solving skills through field activity, through studio works, and so on. And all these are very, very critical to getting in those what we call employability skills. Now, having said this, the policy also talks of a very great need to reinvigorate vocational education and open and distance learning. And this has been embedded into it. And the other end, while we are talking about knowledge dissemination, which is what is the undergraduate program, the need for encouraging research becomes very important. So knowledge generation and knowledge production is equally important. And to give an impetus to research, we are talking about creating a culture of research at undergraduate level. We are including research skills as one of the common courses. Sandeep ji, can you mute yourself? Sandeep Kumar, please mute yourself.
संदीप जी म्यूट करें अपने आप को।
Okay, let's ignore that. And not how to ignore other disturbances that happen. The idea that research
संदीप सर प्लीज म्यूट कर लीजिए।
yeah, just ignore that.
संदीप
संदीप सर प्लीज म्यूट। अरे सर म्यूट कर लीजिए, प्रॉब्लम हो रही है।
Okay, let's ignore Sandeep Kumar because we lose out on our precious time. So the idea is to nurture research at undergraduate level. Ask ourselves this question: why does India's largest higher education system that we have in the world have only single digit universities in global rankings? The reason is because we do not have research culture at undergraduate education. The whole idea that teaching and research go hand in hand together, and therefore a culture of research to be brought about in undergraduate education. As I said, research skills is one of the common courses we are talking about. We are looking at research projects that can come in at undergraduate level. And to create a culture of research, we also need to have a kind of an ecosystem where undergraduate institutions, along with research laboratories and academic and industry, come together so that there is a culture where you can research on new areas and publications and new patents and so on. So ecosystem that nurtures research is being taught, and the NRF is basically looking at giving funding over and above the ICSSR, the DST, the DBT and so on, a funding that can come in into multidisciplinary areas. While we talk of research, which is a high-end kind of a requirement, the other end is the need for entrepreneurial skills. So research and innovation on one side, and entrepreneurial education for startups and incubation centers. By that adage that we commonly hear, not all graduates need to be job seekers, they can be job creators. That can come only if you do it through entrepreneurial education. So this ecosystem is being brought in. I'll stop with 2 or 3 major points that is important in the transformation. One is the integration of technology, where we recognize that technology has an enhancing experience in the learning ecosystem, and that you can have enriched learning, you can have enriched database management, and therefore ERP solutions, and it is also good for effective administration. But what is important is that India is a country which has a huge digital divide. And we saw that during the COVID, when we almost were forced to jump into online education, the lack of digital access and the individual preparedness by teachers, students, and educational institutions, which resulted in what we call is a huge learning loss. Therefore, being cognizant of this divide, and yet at the same time using technology in a very integrated, enriching manner is a need of the hour, and the policy tries to encourage that through its 2 chapters on integration of technology and the creation of NETF, as well as digital architectures like NDR, for putting all technology integrated platforms in a very integrated manner rather than duplicating and sometimes contradicting one another. At the same time, to develop capacity building of faculty and also institutions to use technology in the optimum manner while addressing the needs of offline education for those who do not have access to technological devices. Language development is also being encouraged. As I said, it is very critical that we preserve, protect, and promote our regional languages. And coming to equity, which is the last point I will talk about, is that as a target, gross enrollment ratio target, which is a quantitative target, we need to move towards reaching 50% GER by 2035, which can only be achieved by using open and distance learning, because you cannot have only brick and mortar that can achieve it. But having said that, it is important that we look at making education for all, because that is what SDG goal tells us, and that is what this policy espouses, the 5 goals of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. To ensure inclusive and equitable quality education, we must be able to address the needs of educational aspirations of the so-called socially and economically disadvantaged groups. So we coined a new term as an omnibus term, SCDGs, to look at scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs, linguistic and religious minorities, women, transgenders, urban poor, children coming from vulnerable sections of migrant population, human trafficking, girls and transgenders, children living in inaccessible geographical areas, hilly regions, island regions, and so on, including children with physical disabilities and learning disabilities. So SCDGs required special interventions. And while reservation is taken for granted, over and above the reservation, what steps can be taken to enhance the educational participation of these deprived sections of the society? And for that, we talked about setting up special education zones, gender inclusion funds, social inclusion funds, providing all the facilities and amenities of transportation, such as transport subsidies, in terms of library facilities, study room facilities, hostel facilities, scholarships, and free ships. But a game changer in higher education is the fact that for the first time in independent India, we said we can offer higher education in regional languages. This is the major shift, and that is supposed to be a very critical change. Mind you, you and I sitting here are the most privileged in this society, a thing that we take for granted. India is a country that lives largely in villages, and India is a country which is largely agrarian. A large number of aspiring students who study in regional languages up to their class 12 do not join higher education because language is a barrier, because they cannot learn in a foreign language. So for the first time, we said we will offer higher education, undergraduate, postgraduate, and doctoral education in regional languages. What is the challenge? The ability of teachers to teach bilingually and the availability of the teaching learning resources. So through a mission of translation, we are translating textbooks, reference material, digital content into regional languages. Teachers who are familiar with more than one language other than English can try and start making efforts to teach bilingually. Gradually, we should be able to offer it. So the NEET exams, the CUET exams, the AICT, all entrance exams, IIT, JEE, and so on, all of them are now being offered in regional languages. And these programs, engineering education and all, are now being offered through regional languages. While saying that, let me not undermine the importance of having knowledge of English language. We recognize that it is a link language, it is a language for business, it is a language for employment, and therefore the communicative ability enhancement that is needed in this language must also be provided. But at the same time, to ensure equity and to ensure that those who are not joining are given an enabling possibility is being done by offering higher education in regional languages. So overall, as teachers, the larger changes that we are looking at, the time does not permit to look at governance reforms, regulatory reforms, and reforms in the affiliation system. But as teachers, those areas that directly impact you is what we have tried to cover as the transformations. But let me tell you that this is a huge challenge, because one is the mindset change. As I told you about the dinosaur, we have to start thinking that I cannot teach my students the way my teachers taught me, only because my students have to be prepared for a future where job profiles are not known, where job profiles are constantly changing, and where technologies like disruptive technologies are challenging the kind of jobs. Therefore, if my graduates have to become T-shaped graduates, I start giving up the notions that my discipline is more important than another discipline, that all disciplines start talking to each other and all departments come together in trying to provide the holistic and multidisciplinary education. I'll stop here and we can take up to 11 o'clock questions that you may have. Please ask questions. Please ask questions. Don't wait.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I have questions regarding this ABCD ID. So that is a good initiative.
ABC.
Yes, ABCD.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have a question like, say, for example, one student is moving from this university from West Bengal to Maharashtra. It may happen that the curriculum, the syllabus is totally different. It may happen that they are starting the same course, same topic again. So this is my opinion, like whether it will be better if we can have a homogeneous syllabus throughout the country or homogeneous curriculum throughout the country. What is your opinion on that, and whether the government has any initiative for that? Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Bhakta, my personal and also largely the view that we had in the committee is uniformization and homogenization is not a desirable or a acceptable thing in education. The idea is you must have different ways in which you do it, and the NHEQF, that is the National Higher Education Qualification Framework, where all universities can either come under 12B or 2F of the UGC, have a broad curricular framework where more or less the subtopics to be covered have an 80% of similarity. Your assumption that there could be wide variations actually do not exist. Let us assume I teach Indian political thought. More or less the areas that we teach in Indian political thought across Delhi University or a university in West Bengal or in Kerala or in Maharashtra or anywhere will have more or less an 80% similarity in the curricula. Those are the same political thinkers we talk about. Same thing in organic chemistry or whether it is physics, any subject, all subjects have an 80% similarity. This is what is done because there is a broad curricular framework. The 20% that is varying should not really be a matter of major concern, because we assume that an adult of about 18 years undergoing higher education has capabilities of some independent thinking and ability to assimilate through some bridge courses. So that kind of situation we should not. But why we do not like uniformity, that this is exactly what you need to teach across all the 1,040 universities and across all the colleges and standalone institutions, the world will laugh at having a system of that kind. It is not desirable. Homogeneity is not a desirable term. You can have similarity, you can have a certain kind of a parity, but you cannot have, because that is only done in organizations like the defense. We are not defense establishments. We are capable of independent thought, but you must not put students to difficulty. So the idea that you can have a uniform syllabi is not a desirable thing. 80% similarity is already taken care of by the UGC curricular frameworks in keeping with the National Higher Education Qualification Frameworks. Therefore, there is no need for us to really have major concern. Credits earned by a student in West Bengal and going into the second year into Maharashtra or Delhi or anywhere in India should not really pose a problem, because we have factored in learner mobility and credit mobility.
Thank you.
Ma'am, there is this mention of an internship, a mandatory internship for anyone who wishes to exit of a course at any stage. Ma'am, but what kind of arrangements are we as faculties in a college are supposed to make for this arrangement of internship? Are we supposed to get recruiters, or are we expected to get the students to look for recruiters on their own? What are we supposed to do here?
The idea of internship is somehow misplaced, because we are looking at internships like engineering students or students in medicine and so on. Internships for all undergraduate programs across a range of disciplines, which are in social sciences and humanities and so on, talk about a variety of them which are non-industrial by nature. Therefore, there is no way that 40 million students who are studying undergraduate degrees can go to industry or corporate for internships. These internships can be studio work activities, interning with a library, interning with a postgraduate department, interning with an NGO, studying a government scheme. All these are the varieties. I would urge each one of you, having heard your questions, you must read through the UGC guidelines mandatorily for you to get a better understanding. These are the 4-year undergraduate curriculum, which talks about a range of internships that students can do. Second is the multiple entry and exit. Third is transforming institutions into multidisciplinary institutions. If you read these three together, you will get an idea as to all what I'm trying to tell you. So the idea is that if, let us say, since you are from English literature and a student wants to do a study which is an internship, you can think in terms of sending that student either to a media house, if you wish to have journalistic approach to that. If you don't want that, there is a PG department which is offering something in a given literature area, which can be poetry or writing or prose, whatever. You can ask them to do that. You can ask them to attach themselves to another research scholar who has already done it, or a postdoctoral scholar, or a retired teacher. So we have given a range of it. Please don't understand that internship for sciences, social sciences, humanities, and the non-technical subjects are to be done in industry or corporate. They are not the ones which we are tracking. However, if a student wants to do an internship on a skill-based course, let us say in retail management, then the college may have to think how they can try and speak to people who are there. But largely, there are also the latest UGC guidelines on internships, which tell you the modus operandi of how you go about it. There has to be a nodal officer in every college who takes care of internship requirements. If it is pure technical subjects, yes, it is industry and corporate. If it is non-technical subjects, there are ways in which we have said you can tie up with the government departments, because there are a lot of government schemes. Please understand, we taxpayers are paying money for implementing a lot of government schemes. None of these schemes have been ever studied or understood in terms of its impact. And these are some of the areas which are absolutely critical areas which help in futuristic planning. Therefore, many of these government schemes actually require youngsters. Mind you, these are all unpaid interns. They are just going there to have an enrichment in terms of that work experience, going and meeting people, talking to them, understanding that. Therefore, the bridge that you need to do is only facilitate their connect. And that is because these are all not industry and corporate, but dealing with many other agencies. The idea of internships at undergraduate level is to be seen in working with the community, working with the government, working with the NGO sector, working with retired people, working with postgraduate departments, working with media houses, working in museums, working in libraries, and many other ways. So these have all been explicitly given. Time does not permit me to focus too much onto that area. But if you read through the internship guidelines, as well as the UGC's 4-year undergraduate curriculum and transforming institutions into multidisciplinary, you will get a range of ideas how to go about facilitating students to take up these internships.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Jayrane, that could be the last question I can take because I have to wind up at 11.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much for allowing me for my question. My question is regarding the NSQF also. Because I was working in Maharashtra earlier from 2014 on the Bureau Academy of Places, vocational courses. So the issue with that is multiple universities was taking that NSQF framework, whatever framework you have given by the UGC that time in 2014, they were taking their own perception of credit structure. The issue was with that it was earlier semester by 750 credits for a student, 6 semesters, but people were accepting 360 credits only for the semester. So we need to think about somehow we need to think about the operation, exact execution of the frameworks or the credit structure should not be on the perception base. One thing. And second thing, my question was regarding earlier the first draft, which was said two assistant professor and one associate professor for the one group structure. And later on, after 1 and 2 years, it changed and came to only single assistant professor for the entire center. So this made a chaos in Maharashtra as well as the other states also at that time.
No. So, Mr. Rane, let me put it like this to you. One is, as far as the framework is concerned, NSQF is now merged under the NHQF. Okay. The NHEQF takes into account the NSQF also. And therefore, the allocation of credits under the 4-year program, which has the skill-based courses, will also become multidisciplinary. If I may say, the so-called bachelors of vocational education will also become a multidisciplinary program, and therefore all the requirements of common courses and core courses, multidisciplinary courses, all of them will be incorporated within the BWOC program. And the credit structure, that which is given by the UGC, is the guiding framework. Each state government has brought out in either 2021 or 2022 state regulations, and therefore whatever you have said about 2014 will be superseded by the revised regulations, and you need to look at what it is as far as Maharashtra is concerned. Now, coming about the ratio of assistant professor to associate professor to professor, UGC has got certain guidelines, which is again, as I said, not mandatory but recommendatory. And each state government, depending upon what suits their individual context, have arrived at certain decisions. However, if there are anomalies in the kind of reallocation of assistant professor, see, the normal idea is that you will have more at assistant professor, still lesser at associate professor, and much lesser at professor level. It goes pyramidically, more or less. And therefore, depending on the workload, if it is largely a undergraduate teaching institution, if it is a PG teaching institution, the number of professors will be more, and then lesser number for associate professors, and maybe much lesser for assistant professors. So whether it is UG or PG will be the deciding factor as to the ratio of assistant to associate to professors. Now, each state government brings out its own norms, and if there are anomalies, because usually there are anomalies, these need to be tackled by taking it up with the state government. So I don't have a ready-made answer for your second one, but for your first one, definitely you should be giving up the 2014 one and looking at the 2020 or 2021-22, these 3 years, whatever latest regulations have come in. But NSQF is now seen as part of the NHEQF, and NSQF has also been accounted in terms of the credits under the National Credit Framework. So for shortage of time, that would be the last question that I would take up, because I have to address the next batch starting at 11:15. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions, please
Thank you,
share
ma'am.
with
Thank
Dr.
you,
Faiza, and we can take it up through email so that your
Thank
queries
you,
can be
ma'am.
answered.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
So much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
ये अभी FIP20 चल रहा था.
क्लास हो गई?
यस हो गई।
खत्म हो गई मैम।
हमको वही तो साहिल मैम, अभी तो हम लोग ज्वाइन किए हैं ना।
वही तो।
अरे नहीं, 11:15 से अपनी क्लास में होगी।
11
ये
बजे
मुझे
तक
लगता है ये FIP20 वाले लोग थे।
11:15
हमारी 11 बजे से स्टार्ट होगी, 11:15 से।
11:15 से।
अच्छा, लगता है
सेम
मैम
यही
अभी
क्लास।
आएंगी ना? अच्छा
वही तो मुझे लगा शुरू करते ही खत्म हो गया क्लास।
अच्छा अच्छा।
11:15 से है क्या? हम लोग की तो 9:30 बजे से स्टार्ट हो गई थी।
अच्छा, मुझे लगता है लिंक सेम है ज्वाइन करने के लिए, बट
मुझे
हो
भी लग
सकता है
रहा है।
हाँ।
लोग ना ग्रुप छोड़ के जा भी रहे हैं, मीटिंग छोड़ के, उनको लग रहा है कि हो ही गई क्लास।
हो सकता है कि
नहीं
लोग
नहीं
कंफ्यूज हो गए होंगे, दो क्लासेस
नहीं
पहले
नहीं,
चल के।
अभी रहिए अवनीश जी,
जी
मीटिंग
मैम,
छोड़ना नहीं है।
नहीं ज्वाइन तो
माइक
करना ही है, क्योंकि हम लोग का सेशन तो अभी स्टार्ट होना है।
नहीं नहीं, आप लोग का
वो
हो गया
पिछले
है,
बैच वाले हो
क्लास
सकते
हो
हैं।
चुकी है, हम लोग लीव कर रहे हैं 20 वाले।
अच्छा,
एक्चुअली 11 बजे ज्वाइन करने की आदत है ना मैम, तो लिंक पे 10:55 पे ही ज्वाइन कर लिए।
हाँ हाँ, नहीं तो फिर एंट्री में प्रॉब्लम होती है ना,
हाँ
लेट होने से फिर प्रॉब्लम होने लगती है, इसीलिए
बिल्कुल
मैं भी
बिल्कुल।
थोड़ा सा 5 मिनट पहले कर